G'day. G'day. Can you all make sense of my slightly weird Swedish Australian accent, first of all? Yeah? Cool. For the more analog radio antenna in the room, you can just nod. For the extroverts, please don't hold back. Who was at karaoke last night, just by a show of hands? I hear a rumor. All these people, clearly. Okay, good. Just making sure my slightly weird Swedish Australian accent is making some kind of sense so far. Fantastic. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as a futurist, which basically means my mum has absolutely no idea what I actually do for a living. She calls me her son, the one who used to be a lawyer, who's now a glorified astrologer. There's no one like your family to tell you actually what you do for a living, truly. Does anyone else struggle to explain what you actually do for work, or is it just me? Okay, clearly you're all in honourable professions then. I forecast the future, apparently, according to my mum. But as a futurist, I'm also a little bit of a traditionalist and, dare I say, a little bit of a humanist. So what I want to figure out with all of you today is the enduring need for the physical, the analogue, and yes, human beings, even in a world of digitisation and artificial intelligence. Does that sound like a plan? Cool, because there's no plan B, so this is what we're going to go with. Now, before we do, though, and just a little bit of a cap nod, and I don't often do this in terms of, hyping the sponsors, but I do love the old Roman god of Janus. And I just wanted to give you a perspective on this because I think it's really, really important when we think about the combination of the physical and the analog and the digital and the virtual. So Janus is the Roman god of beginnings, endings, gates, and transitions, famously depicted with two faces looking in opposite directions. He presides over doorways, passages, and even time itself. And of course, the month of January is named in his honor. Sort of gives me goosebumps here thinking about the industry that you guys are all in. We're going to talk about beginnings and endings, transitions, doorways, gates, all the rest. And I want to put a little bit of an artificial intelligence lens over all of this as well. You'll probably also get a little bit of a sense here this morning that science fiction is very, very quickly becoming science fact. So kick us off. Let's talk about a science fiction movie some of you might have seen. And if you haven't already seen this movie, now as part of your CPD or continuous learning programs and points, etc., you all have permission to go and watch the movie Ex Machina. Who's seen this movie? Just by show of hands. Cool. Who's not going to raise their hands no matter what I ask for the remaining 57 minutes? Okay, it is a trick question, just checking, all right? Now, this movie is about the Turing test. What's the Turing test? Some of you might ask, named after the computer scientist Alan Turing. It's a blind test, an imitation game where in a blind test, a human doesn't know whether he, she, pronoun, is interfacing with a robot or with a human. And in this particular instance, where the robot is so sophisticated in its emotional intelligence, its parlance, its communication skills, that it can fool us into thinking we're interacting with another human being. Does this sound eerily familiar to some of the weird TikTok videos of avatars that you've seen recently and you don't know whether it's fact or fiction? Now, the producers, the marketing team behind this movie thought, how on earth are we going to launch a movie about the Turing test, about artificial intelligence gone into super intelligence mode? And they thought, why don't we launch it at the coolest conference in town, Self-Storage Week 2025, on your conference apps? No, they did it at the second coolest conference in town, the South by Southwest conference in Austin, Texas. But they did it on the most logical digital platform available to them at the time, on Tinder. Now, if you're in a relationship, please don't research Tinder, okay? It might also be the reason that many of your businesses actually exist. Okay, all right. And unbeknownst to the lovesick puppies in the audience at the South by Southwest conference, they'd built an avatar based upon the looks of the Swedish actress Alicia Vikander without all the weird cyborg headgear. And because she's female, but also artificially intelligent, she was able to multitask and have a multitude of flirtatious conversations at the same time with the lovesick puppies who had all changed their geostrategic settings on their Tinder dating profiles to Austin, Texas, hoping to go on a hot date later on that evening. And as part of any good marketing conversation, you need a little flirtatious call to action at the end. Her call to action was, if you want to see more pretty pictures of me, please go to my Instagram account. What do you think awaited them on her Instagram account? A little message saying, you've been hacked. Here's a promotion about a movie about the Turing test. Great marketing campaign, proving the case in point that we're now at the point where artificial intelligence is so sophisticated, we can all be fooled into thinking we're interacting with another human being. Of course, this has repercussions for all of your businesses in terms of biometrics, facial recognition, even in terms of sad cases like domestic violence and other people trying to get into, unbeknownst to maybe your particular clients, into your sheds or your storage space. Science fiction is very, very quickly becoming science fact. And recently, when OpenAI put ChatGPT through that big challenge online, the gold standard of whether you're a human or whether you're a robot, the CAPTCHA test. Now, I don't know about you, but I frequently fail the CAPTCHA test. Anyone else with me? All right, fantastic. There's a few more robots here in the audience, clearly. A few cyborgs at least. This is the gold standard, which makes me a little bit nervous about the future of autonomous vehicles, because if autonomous vehicles powered by artificial intelligence cannot see a zebra crossing, I fear for all of us. Okay. Now, they said, hey, ChatGPT, go and figure this out. If you're so smart, hack through the CAPTCHA test. What do you think ChatGPT did? It hired a human being on TaskRabbit, the international equivalent of Airtasker, and said, hey, here's some money. Can you do the CAPTCHA test on my behalf? The human being in this particular instance got a little bit suspicious and went, why on earth would you want me to do the CAPTCHA test on your behalf? Are you a robot? The robot said, in an age of diversity, equity, and inclusion, how dare you accuse me of being a robot? Gaslighting and manipulating the human being to hack the CAPTCHA test on its behalf. We are now at the point where we are passing the Turing test, ladies and gentlemen. And while this might sound dystopian, it also can enhance our emotional intelligence, our business processes, the security in our sheds, in our storage space, and actually start telling an engaging story for Australians. Maybe even help you with your revenue management. Maybe even help the clients, the 22% who are in arrears and who on day 39 decide to pay every time. Right? Who are about fear and maybe fearful that their stuff will get sold on storage wars on live television. Right? We can start telling news stories by enhancing our ability to communicate and actually scale our human empathy in new ways. And here's a little example of a company that has just done that.
My friend, David. Hello, scammers. I'm your worst nightmare. I'm an AI created by O2 to waste phone scammers' time. So W then a dot. 3 times W and then dot.
I think your profession is bothering people, right?
I'm just trying to have a little chat. Gosh, how time flies. It's showing me a picture of my cat, Fluffy.
It's showing you the picture of your cat, Fluffy.
Stop calling me E, stupid. Got it, dear. Because while they're busy talking to me, they can't be scamming you. And let's face it, dear, I've got all the time in the world.
So I think Daisy is brilliant, and also a cap nod to my elderly parents, who I believe provided all the training data to train Daisy on, because my parents have an amazing patience and they love talking to people, calling them from contact centres. It's amazing. So very, very patient lady. So can this stuff be good? Can it be bad? Can it be used for evil? Can it be used for enhancing your businesses and looking after your clients? Absolutely. Now, I've recently, as any good Swede, been in the business of building a sauna. Now, saunas are all over the place, whether they're, I was going to say radioactive, no, infrared, or whether they're traditional Swedish, Finnish saunas, but they're everywhere. And this is how I make sense of space. Now, maybe I, as a consumer, is sometimes a little bit spatially challenged. But if I see a sauna and videos, I can kind of imagine storage space. Follow me along on this. How many of your clients have issues and challenges spatially imagining how much space they actually need for their belongings as they go through life transitions? Many. Just say, hey, it's like three saunas, three-person saunas. There's new ways to communicate online, and maybe we can all learn from adjacent fields that also sell boxes to us. I know yours may not have heating. Some of them do have cooling for great bottles of wine, which, by the way, the next generation of Gen Z who don't drink will not be doing in the future. All right, we'll get back to this demographic trend in just a moment. Now, I said as a futurist, I'm a little bit of a traditionalist and, dare I say, a little bit of a humanist. And I just want to explore with you why on earth this is the case. So before we talk about some major mega trends shaping your industry's future, let me take you back on a journey back into the past for a moment in time, back to my native city of Stockholm, Sweden, to a time 110 years ago where things were just a little bit simpler. Things were moving a little bit more slowly. Things were just a little quieter. Things were black or white, this or that. Amazingly, back then, people only wore black or white clothing to keep things really, really simple. And this here was the urban vista that once upon a time greeted a man by the name of Georg Johansson, or the son of Johan, which sounds very Viking-esque, or as we'd call him here in Australia, George Johansson. As the second oldest son on the family farm, he had few inheritance rights, and as a result, he had to make his own commercial future in the cityscape of Stockholm. And his commercial opportunity, after 6 years of completing a retail apprenticeship, was to take his venture capital, his life savings, and breathe life into his first bricks and mortar store, his first outlet. And his opportunity was to dress the increasingly sophisticated Swedish gentlemen of that era. And of course, this was a time before artificial intelligence, before TikTok dancing, before YouTube shorts, when looking into a camera was still very, very much of a technological novelty. And his business model was, of course, about the personal touch, the belly-to-belly, the face-to-face, the bespoke portfolio for his clients. And as he became a man of commerce, in a cap nod of approval to his family heritage and his farming background, he decided to change his surname from Johansson to the man from the southern farm, or in Swedish, Georg Sörman. He's my great-grandfather, and as you can tell, he must have been a bit of a futurist because he's got a great haircut, a cool little pocket square, and you can also see that we share some genealogical traits with North Korean dictators. And he invested in the latest technology of that era, the neon sign, back in 1937, a few years after it opened up the store, to win the then analog hearts and the then analog minds of yesteryear's customers. But for my mother, Birgitta, who looks amazing for a 106-year-old, we moisturize in our family. She still tells me what to wear every day, and she tells me Harry high pants is coming back into fashion. Thanks, Mum. For her, the business environment has fundamentally, in an age of digitization, changed her business, for better and for worse. Today, the customer will walk into the store, spend time with Mum. She'll tell them about all the bells and whistles, all the features, the family businesses around the world she sources her goods from. Then, scanning a barcode incentivized from Amazon with a 5% discount to build Amazon's comparative real-time pricing cloud, they'll say, hey, we'll think about it. And you know they're not going to think about it. They exit the store to the sound of a very, very lonely little bell, go around the corner and order the item on Mr. Porter or on Amazon.com/fashion instead. My mum calls this new demographic, this new client, a cyber terrorist. And I think you can understand why. My mum loves the physical. My mum loves paperwork. It gives her a sense of control. She measures her SKUs with a pen and paper like this. This is her version of big data. Bless her cotton socks. But the reality is that her business today is perfectly prepared for a world that no longer exists. Because the customer has already digitized their information-focused minds. They are already consuming content, yes, from Instagram on what a sauna looks like and what 3x3 might look like, right? They have different ways of educating themselves, and they're not spending their hard-earned money with my mum anymore. A few years ago, I wrote a little love letter to my mum called Digilog, How to Win the Digital Minds and the Analog Hearts of Tomorrow's Customers, where I say to my mum, Mum, this is not about throwing away the analog baby with the digital bathwater. The future might feel extremely virtualized, yes, but we have to enhance, tell our stories, our brand DNA, the beautiful history of your father and your father before him, the family heritage, family history, but also scale that empathy with a generation of clients that speak a different language and scale the story so it lives on. My mum thinks of the digital world as digitally dehumanizing, right? Now, Westpac, Australia's oldest bank, second largest bank, credits the ideas in this book with them moving from number 4 in terms of retail banking customer satisfaction to number 1. Unfortunately, the person I wrote this little love letter for has not yet read the love letter, who senses a little bit of intergenerational tension. Any family businesses in the room that can relate? No one dares raise their hands. Who just feels, there's a few, all right. Who feels like you're just part of a family therapy session so far? Thanks for hanging out, by the way. It's a great group therapy session here. All right. Now, just to give you the terms of reference here, and this is why I also spoke about the god of Janus, right? This is about the ability to both have a picture and a clear view both towards the analog world and the digital world, past, present, and future at the same time. Yes, the face-to-face, but also interface to interface. One's about the high touch, one is about the high tech. One is about winning hearts, the other one is about winning minds. One's about 9 to 5, one is about 24/7, 365. And they're not mutually exclusive. They are in fact mutually reinforceable, particularly in an era of artificial intelligence. And if you're wondering what this weird squiggle up in the top right-hand corner is, it's your invitation to engage with the virtual world and make sure that you can download all the slides as well. Please plant a tree if you're going to print them out. Who didn't realize that we need pandemics to adopt new technologies? Like the QR code was there way, way before the pandemic. Telemedicine was there way, way before the pandemic. But as a human species, we just need a little pandemic to change our behaviors and to make us curious. Do we see the irony? Hopefully, we won't need another pandemic to start adopting new technologies like artificial intelligence, for example. Now, I shared a little story with my mother. I've just come back from India where I was working with NCR Atleos, which is the world's largest manufacturer of ATM machines. Yes, cash is still king in certain parts of the world. Maybe some of you still get paid in cash, by the way. And I share this little story of what can happen when you start digitizing. I shared this story with my mum. This is Raj. He's a fisherman in Kerala in India. And for eons, for centuries, him and his forebears have been going out to sea, caught the catch of the day, and even though he always had the choice of 11 different equidistant harbours from the fishing waters to go back to, oftentimes he would just default based on his intuition to go back to the harbour closest to his loved ones. Makes sense, right? Until one day, and this has been covered in the Quarterly Journal of Economics and later in the Economist magazine, where they studied what happened to the people that picked up the Nokia 330 mobile phone. Do you remember the really cool one with a flashlight? Because Raj figured out that because of Bharti Airtel, there was coverage up to 22 kilometres away from the shoreline, which meant he could call his mates in the 11 different harbours and see, what's the price of fish? because of demand and supply, it would vary. Do you think he started making different choices as a result of picking up new technology to manage his revenue, his catch of the day? The Quarterly Journal of Economics studied this, and they compared and contrasted. And for the fishermen who mobilized and picked up the new technology, their net profit went up by 8%, and the wastage in the harbors went down by 4% because demand and supply started meeting in some kind of equilibrium. My mum refused to listen to the story. And sadly, during the pandemic, after 104 years in business, my parents filed for bankruptcy. This is not something you want to do when you're in your late 60s, early 70s. 104 years of history, gone. Now, my mum always blames the pandemic, but we all know retailers and businesses who did extremely well in the pandemic. Why? Partly because they digitally diversified their customer journeys ahead of time or during the pandemic. Do you think it's popular to have a futurist as your son in a family business context? How annoying, right? Okay. Now, the silver lining is now mum gets to be an amazing grandmother to her grandkids, and she's an amazing grandma, and we're very, very lucky to have her, and she now has more time because she doesn't run the family business anymore. But tragically, 104 years worth of brand heritage now evaporated. Now, my mum has learnt in her retirement to sometimes send me little, slightly passive-aggressive YouTube videos, and here's something she recently sent to me.
Emma. 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 Emma.
Thanks, Mum. All right. She does have a good sense of humor. All right. Some things we'll clearly never, ever digitize. Now, a week and a half ago, I was in Los Angeles, and I decided to step into a robo-taxi, the Waymo, which is a phenomenal experience. That week, I had a couple of times stepped into cars like Ubers on the highway, just missed out on having 2 major accidents with the human drivers. And I was like, I'm going to try the robots instead because I don't know that my heart will manage another 10-centimeter avoidance of a serious crash. And I stepped into the Waymo, and I've never felt safer. Never felt safer. This thing doesn't drive while drinking, doesn't text while driving, doesn't have road rage. In fact, it's the most courteous person on the road, giving more space to any pedestrians, the homeless population of LA, etc., than any human driver ever would. It's displaying a level of near emotional intelligence, sensorially aware.
Please make sure your seatbelt is fastened. For any questions, press the call support button to speak to the rider support agent.
Now, a couple of observations. Who's freaked out by that, by the way? A few? Who's just going, oh my God, that's so calming? And then you go, oh, but there's not going to be a human who like puts your bags inside of the car. And I go, Uber drivers don't do that anyway. Okay, so 2 comments about that is I step out of that vehicle feeling super safe, and I go to my favorite cafe in Los Angeles, and they go, cash only tips. And I'm going, in the high-tech state of California, right, the home of artificial intelligence, people still just take cash for payment, right? Janus-faced thinking, right? Right? One eye to the past, one eye to the future at the same time. Later on that evening, I took a similar Waymo back after I'd been out for dinner. I'd had a couple of Negronis, so I was feeling pretty good. And all of a sudden, I was surrounded by 5 hoodlums who were trying to break into the robot taxi. And maybe because I was pretty chill because I'd had a few Negronis, I was like, this is just anthropological research. Maybe I should have been more scared. And then I'm going, you're all on about 1,000 different cameras, guys. They were trying to break in, and I go, and they didn't get in. Obviously, I'm here today. But I figured out that if that had been a human driver, they would either probably freaked out, maybe escalated the situation by actually driving through the people who were circumnavigating us on the road on their bikes and motorbikes, or they would have told me to hand over my watch, maybe my passport, whatever, or, wallets are useless these days because people, well, actually they do want cash in LA. But the robot remained very quiet, and of course all the support is there just by pressing a button. Never felt safer. In DV situations where someone's trying to break into your sheds, is there merit in technologies like this? Biometrics, facial recognition, maybe the biometrics of getting into your sheds, your boxes, your storage, right? This can actually enhance the service level that people experience in critical moments and critical transitions. Now, my futurist forebear and the scientist Roy Amara had this to say about how we tend to think about technologies, and said humans tend to think in a very linear fashion about new technologies, the black line, but of course the red line, technology, moves in an exponential or at least sigmoid curve fashion. We tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short term or short run, but we underestimate it over the longer term. So yes, we've loved to hype new technologies like AI, virtual reality, or autonomous vehicles, for example. Then we move on to the next thing in the news cycle. But we forget about the longer term impacts of GPS navigation, the number of marriages it has saved in Australia over the last 40 years, telemedicine or internet and e-commerce, which have fundamentally shifted society. But I would argue that when it comes to AI, we must not underestimate it either in the short term or in the longer term. Now, agentic AI, and we'll come back to this in a moment, agentic AI has a new Moore's law attached to it. What's Moore's law, you might ask? Moore's law holds that computing power doubles every 18 to 24 months, coming down in price at the same time. Technology is deflationary in price, so it actually becomes cheaper over time. Moore's law for agentic AI, where an AI agent will represent you on your behalf, and you can just speak into the AI and say, hey, build me this, come up with this grand new recipe, and it will execute for you, come up with a recipe, but also make sure that it does your shopping on Woolworths so that all the ingredients actually arrive at your door without you actually having to do anything. That's agentic AI, right? Is now doubling in its sophistication every 3 months. Every 3 months. So we sit back and skeptically look at these developments and go, we're just going to move into a second mover advantage, sit back and just observe what's happening. Your competition is 2xing you in the next quarter, 4xing you in the next 2 quarters, and 16x's you in the next 12 months. Yes, ethical deployment is important when it comes to these new technologies, but this is the exponential speed we are now moving at. Now, I live in Sydney on the northern beaches, up in a beautiful part of the world called Great Mackerel Beach. Partly because I love it, and partly because, according to my financial advisor, I'm also going through an asset minimization strategy, also known as a divorce. Right? So I moved into my summer house, which kind of looks like a sauna, but it's not quite a sauna. It's a lovely part of the world, and I'm experiencing my own transition there. I'm living there when my boys are with me. I have 2 beautiful little mini Vikings who are 4 and 8, and we love hanging out in nature offshore in the Ku-ring-gai National Park. Now, as any good Swede, one of my hobbies is to chop wood because my cabin is semi-off-grid. Sometimes my technique is not that good, so recently I injured my back. So yes, I'm here today to talk about divorce and back pains, ladies and gentlemen, but we'll make it lighthearted. All right. All the middle-aged woes I'm going through at the same time, by the way. Okay. So I injured my L5 on my spine. I went to Dr. Erin Noonan at the Newport Doctors, who's an amazing doctor. And she said, Anders, you know, last time you came into our practice, you know, I used to turn my back onto you because I used to have to turn my back away from you so I could capture your electronic medical health records. I only do this now because of illustration purposes. Breaking rapport. She's like, would you mind if Heidi Health, an Australian AI medical scribe, captured our conversation instead so you and I can actually remain connected to the point where it gets a little bit awkward? Yeah? And I was like, no, that's totally fine. I'm a futurist, so you had me at AI, right? She goes, Anders, I didn't train for 12 years to become an AI medical scribe, typing in notes. I'd way rather see patients. My wait lines are long. I do 2 to 3 hours of paperwork every day, preventing me from seeing the number of patients I could otherwise see. Does this sound familiar to anyone who loves doing paperwork? Who hates it? All right, there's a number, right? She goes, in Australia, did you know, Anders, that 80% of what gets said in a medical consult gets forgotten? So would you mind if you get a letter in Year 4 English explaining what the heck went on in this medical consult? And I was like, please give it to me. And she's like, no, the AI will give that letter to you, highlighting any medical terminology and how I can adhere to the medical regime. Is that deeply humane? And for her, it captures the electronic medical health records, and on top, it will write her any referral that she needs to any specialist or radiology services. What's happening here? While she's also making more money because she can see more patients, is that technology is helping her take the robot out of the human so she can do less of the menial and the mundane and the boring shit, excuse my French, and do more of the meaningful and the humane, which is what she loves doing, like seeing patients, more patients, having better health outcomes for her patients. Could we do something similar in our businesses? You see someone face to face and they're going, hey, I'm a bit spatially unaware, like the futurist. Can you just remind me again and again and again, you know, how many volumetric meters I actually need? Right? And you go, here's the letter that was AI generated, and here's the video explaining how many saunas are in your storage. Talking a different language so we truly understand. And the next level to this is when her AI agent speaks to my AI agent representing me to manage all of the healthcare appointments in the future. And here's what that might soon look like.
I am your friendly, all-knowing GP. I just got a report from your radiologist. Your cortisone spinal tap last week was successful, and the referral to your Medicare-funded physio appointments has been automatically generated. And we have taken the liberty of proactively booking your first appointment based on your shared Google Cal availability. We cross-checked your timings with your avatar. Payments will happen seamlessly in the background, so you don't need to worry about lodging any claims. We know a picture says 1,000 words and video says 1,000 images. So click on the link below to access your radiology for dummies report. I hope your recovery goes well and that you will be back to chopping wood at your cabin in no time, re-Viking you.
Okay, so the comedic timing is a little bit off, hand gestures a little bit off. 2 minutes worth of recording your face, your hand gestures means heygen.ai can make you say anything that you feed into the engine in any language that you choose, including languages you don't speak. Might this be good for you if you're talking to different generations, different types of demographics, maybe an immigrant family explaining what actually happens at Kennard's, right? This gives us all the ability to actually scale our empathy and do the things that we used to procrastinate on. Because AI actually helps us today turn a should into a could, because it's helping us execute on our behalfs. Right? This is what it's now capable of. Now, as I said, I sort of live, let's call it, I'm still in Sydney, I'm not quite in the regions, but I do just want to switch mode here for a moment and think about longer term, where people are also going to live, which might affect your business models moving forward. Here's Jonathan Mott from Barrenjoey and his perspectives on where people might live in the future.
At the same time, you look at it and say, well, lending to investors earning more than $500,000 a tonne is up 166% and is now 9%. So the 1% of society who are investors are getting more credit than the 60% who are owner-occupied. Now, is that the right number? So a 25 basis point cut, yeah, it helps. Everyone's going to say that's great, but there's so much more to do. And is it fit for purpose? Because we're all for it 5 years, 10 years, 8 years, however long we want to put it. This is not sustainable. Here's a really good question. If this doesn't change and you live in Sydney, you'll never know your grandkids. Because they won't be able to afford a house in Sydney. They won't live here.
Heartening, disheartening, true, untrue. When we think about future generations and when people might need storage and some of the phases in life where people spend money on possessions, etc., upsize, downsize, etc., two critical moments. One is when people buy houses and couple up, and one is when people have kids. I know having kids and all the stuff that's in storage at the back of my office in my co-working space in Avalon Beach, for example, is stuff that maybe I should be getting rid of or maybe putting into proper storage, right? But those two things, family formation and buying a house, the next generation ain't doing any of those, particularly in the major cities, because they can't afford it, unless they go to the fortunate ones who have the 5th largest bank in Australia, which is the bank of mum and dad. Many people do not have that. So people are moving to Zoom towns, to regional towns like Canberra, Newcastle, Hobart, Geelong, Gold Coast. Yes, it's considered a regional area according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, but they're moving and having tree changes and sea changes. Something for you guys to think about when you think about your future business models. The other piece here, and as Luke alluded to, I've been the 2025 Futurist in Residence for the Brisbane Broncos, which has been very much a privilege. We weren't meant to win this year, but we'll take it. We've been doing their future work out to 2032 to align with the Brisbane Olympics. And one of the things we produced for the Brisbane Broncos was this trend report on the demographic, technological, sociocultural trends, etc., affecting Australia moving forward, and also just the role of the Brisbane Broncos in community. You might have seen the black jersey earlier this year talking about mental health, for example. But a key statistic here is that 98% of young Australians reported anxiety or depression feelings in the past year, with 38.8% of people aged 16 to 24 having a 12-month mental disorder. This is a woeful set of statistics. The loneliest generation used to be the elderly in our society. Now the loneliest are the young kids. One government intervention in all of this is, of course, the social media ban that's being talked about and it's being implemented as we speak. Will it fix all of these issues? Maybe not. But how might this affect future family formation? Future family formation for a generation where a vast majority say they would be happy to have an AI girlfriend, AI husband, or AI wife, because spending time with humans is too much effort. Where will they put their stuff if they actually consider getting married to a robot on the internet? Maybe some of them will have humanoid robots, but that's a different conversation as well. Who just wants to retire before you have to learn any of this new shit? The great thing is if we just retire today, the robots can never ever steal our jobs, right? Okay, but it is a little bit worrying. Let's talk about the new generation for a moment here, right? Gen Z men who do not drink alcohol. Here are some of their key differentiating attitudes. 40% say, I usually consult a professional financial advisor before deciding on financial matters. These are people born after 1994 to 2010, by the way. Aren't they puritanical? I don't normally eat between meals. 23% say I have a periodic health check even when I'm feeling fine. You're born in 2010, hopefully you're feeling pretty energetic. All right? And 22% say I prefer vegan food and drink. And as you can see on the left-hand side, most of them are sober curious or totally sober. Maybe if they ever start having kids with a robotic womb out of China, which is a real thing at the moment, maybe they'll start drinking and storing their cases of wine with you. But this is a very, very different generation. If they really want to have a party, they go and eat a caramel sticky bun from Legendary Foods, which has 20 grams of protein and only 1 gram of sugar. That's a big night out for Gen Z. Sorry to all the Gen Zs in the audience. Clearly, I'm just getting old and like miserable and I need to, criticize another generation. It's the Gen Y talking. And the really cool thing we can go and have is, again, a sober rave, no alcohol in a sauna, because it's also good for our health at the same time. This is when they hang out with other human beings. So some of the key trends that you might be thinking about for the future. On top of that, by 2030, the forecast is that 2.3 million Australians will be on Ozempic. 2.3 million Australians on Ozempic. What does this do to our current wardrobes? Are they going into the circular economy, on Facebook Marketplace, or are people going to store them, thinking that maybe when they're off Ozempic, they'll balloon back up and they'll need their clothes back? The interesting thing here is that smart businesses are already tuning into this trend. Like restaurants in New York, for example, they'll give you a little mini martini, but they won't charge you half for it. Their margins are actually better. We'll give you the mini hamburger with 7 chips. Because people on Ozempic don't have appetites and they don't want to drink. Right? 2.3, this is 10% of the Australian population will be on Ozempic in the next 5 years. Again, think about how something like that might affect your business model moving forward. And in the not too distant future, we'll all have a humanoid robot looking after us in our homes. Meaning that maybe for the elderly population, they can actually stay in their family home for longer because they'll have Optimus looking after them and their every need. Maybe they won't need to downsize because this guy or girl will mow the lawn, cook the food, and run all the laundry. I'll be standing in a queue when this actually becomes mainstream because I need it for my cabin. All right. So a few little demographic trends there. We're just going to turn down the music on that one for a moment. But I just wanted to consider for a moment while we play an amazing old 80s track, yes, how your differentiating characteristics that used to make you successful in the past, what those are, but also what are the new characteristics of your business model, your storytelling, your explanations that you might need to also make sure that you're successful tomorrow. We good, Rob? Cool. All right. Take a pen and paper out. Have a little think. What made you successful? What legacy adjectives for your storage business differentiated you, made you compete, made you competitive, made you win hearts and minds? And given what you've heard so far today, how are you going to capture hearts in the future? What are the differentiating characteristics of your brand that will make it successful, not just today or in the past, but how much you need to pivot to make sure it's also successful in the near future? If you just want to listen to Taylor Dane for forever, you can also do that. And remember this slide whenever you do, that it's clearly part of management consulting and it fits really, really well into your future planning. All right, let's move forward. So what's the role of humans in all of this AI, future demographic stuff where people are having tree changes and sea changes and cannot afford to live in Sydney anymore? I believe this is the formula of success for any human being. To actually tune into our empathy, our emotional intelligence, our EQ, but also your years of experience, your unique quotient, your intelligence, everything you've learned about your business of the last 30, 40, 100 years, whatever it happens to be in your family businesses. But also sprinkle on top of that a little bit of creative quotient, thinking about how we can tell stories like the sauna vendors, for example. But on top of that, have some digital augmentation to make sure that your brands are the most empathetic brands we could ever imagine, right? And how do we make the customer experience feel deeply caring? Not just a functional space where I need to have storage, for example, right? Like if I actually had known a few years ago all the stuff I was going to experience, right? Like the emotionality in a divorce or the asset minimization strategy, right? The emotionality of packing up the boxes still gives me the icks, right? Every time I touch them and they're dusty and I'm like, I still have not moved these things out. It hurts inside, right? Now, I'm not asking you guys to become counselors or psychologists, but these are moments that can trigger people's trauma, right? You guys have such an important part into shaping people, bouncing back, bouncing forward, creating new lives. And I know divorce is not the only driver here, right? Yeah? But imagine what are the emotional opportunities and moments for your clients when they truly need you, and how do you make those moments be moments where people actually gain strength. Now, these are my two sons, Lucian and Aurelian, and no, they're not wearing a wig. They are my mini Vikings. And speaking about that notion of the EQ, UQ, and CQ plus digital augmentation, I think this is totally true in terms of how I interface with my kids, also known as parenting. Yeah? Now, kids don't come with an instruction manual, I've learned. But I've also had to change my parenting a little bit as a single dad these days. And one of the things I do, and I've always done with my kids, is I only speak Swedish with them. Yes, I'm one of these annoying immigrants who refuses to speak English to them. But I want to carry on the cultural linguistics and the heritage and all the rest. So I only speak Swedish to them. Occasionally, they speak Swedish back to me. I do know that they understand everything I say. And sometimes I'll be like, say it so Dad understands, and then they'll just blurt it out in Swedish. And I'm like, can we start there? But, oftentimes they don't, which is fine. So I've given them Duolingo. What is Duolingo? Duolingo is an app. And on this app, they are taking my native tongue, my operational software, Swedish, and this little owl, the cute little owl on Duolingo, in a way that recognizes their unique learning preferences, their unique learning challenges. It will tailor a learning journey for them based on a psychographic of 1. Way better than any human teacher ever could. I've never taught them the weird extra umlauts. We have 3 extra letters in the Swedish alphabet, or with lots of little dots, etc. Never taught that to my kids. The owl did. I might sound angry about this, but I love the fact that the owl is now augmenting my EQ, UQ, and CQ with digital augmentation. When I hear them reach another level of their Swedish knowledge, like spelling smörgåsbord or Valhalla, very important word, right? I go, that was the owl. It's a gamified interface. And when we think about this, it's digital nutrition. What does digital nutrition mean? Any piece of content you create for your business online, whether it's sizing, volumetric explanations, your customer journey, a story about your brand and your family's brand history, for example, that is somebody else's brain chemistry wrapped in a story. In this instance, there's a story about the wise old owl who speaks any language, right? But your content today is somebody else's brain chemistry wrapped in a story. This is mindful technology. And recently when I went to Dr. Erin Noonan and I asked, hey, I'm a little bit worried about Lucian, my oldest. And she said, I think actually he might have a little bit of pre-anxiety. we're going through a divorce, all the rest. And I said, hey, what would you recommend? She's like, well, between me giving you a referral to a child psychologist, easy to say if you're Swedish, to you actually seeing a child psychologist in Australia, there's a wait time of 9 months, given the shortage of human child psychologists in this country. So she said, let me prescribe you an app instead. What stories is your son into? And I go, we're a science fiction family. He's really into Star Wars because I've introduced it in an age-inappropriate fashion, which might explain the pre-anxiety. And she goes, download Headspace, a $3 billion app, mindfulness app, and go to the Star Wars section. So now before bedtime every night, Lucian and I sit down together and we do breath work with Yoda to calm his nervous system so we get to the really good storytelling, the human storytelling, faster. In America today, they are treating people with PTSD, war veterans, with this type of digital interface. Some of us might say, like my mum, the digital is dehumanized. But I would argue that when we use it to scale our empathy, our unique intelligence, our creative intelligence, we can tell better stories about what we do and the transitions that matter in people's lives and how you guys are a springboard to a different future for people, no matter what they're going through and life's transitions. On top of that, we have the ability to now tune into people's preferences even more closely because of artificial intelligence and biometrics. I want to give you an example again of how science fiction is now becoming science fact. Here's a little preview of the Minority Report, which some of you might remember.
Oh no, the villages in the desert. Places. Hello, the larger liquidity is the land history. Make sure.
Okay, so this is the computers and the advertising walls all around him, recognizing him because of his eyes and tailoring every piece of content to John Anderton, to Tom Cruise in this particular movie. Works really well until he has to cut his own eyes out and take someone else's eyes in, and he gets different advertising later on in the movie. A little bit freaky, I know. Does this sound dystopian to some of you? Yeah, so that feels like surveillance, no doubt, for some of you. Some of you might just go, that'd be awesome. Let's truly connect on a deep level with people by actually having really, really tailored information to a person of one. So again, with all these technologies, dystopian and utopian at the same time, the choice is ours what content we want to put out there. Somebody else's brain chemistry wrapped in your stories. What is required here is to start adopting an AI growth mindset. And a quick cap nod here to Carol Dweck's work at the University of Stanford School of Psychology, who came up with the original notion of the growth mindset. She says we need to switch away from a fixed mindset about our future business or personal growth journeys into a growth mindset. And we've added a little bit of an AI layer on top of this. Rather than just going, hey, we're not good at this, it's technology stuff, it's for someone else to do. Right? Just go, what am I missing? Hopefully, some of those missing points have been covered here today. I give up. This stuff's too difficult. Instead, go, I'll use a different strategy. It used to be the case that with AI, you had to have a computing science degree, be a software engineer. Now, the coolest coding language in town is no longer Java or Python. It's Aussie English or Swinglish. If you can speak, if you can type into Claude after this conference, you just goes, here are all the notes I took from this conference. Here's what I'm reflecting on, Claude. Or ChatGPT. You don't even need to type it. Just press down the button and go, can you just summarize and synthesize all my notes from this conference and then help me turn that into my next strategy moving forward based upon the demographic trends and the really cool future reports that we'll get from Self-Storage Association of Australasia so that we truly position our business in a way that wins digital minds and analog hearts, and it will do the work for you. Right? Start deploying the new technology because it is available at your fingertips. AI now speaks human. Who loves digital e-signatures? Who misses the good old days when we used to have to do like a wet signature, get a presidential seal, send it away with a pigeon, maybe the pigeon did not come back with the money, right? Again, another technology we refused to use before the pandemic. But now, according to Forrester's, it shortens sales cycles from 8 days to 3 hours. You get agreements signed up to 21 times faster. Who would like that? Right? Cost and revenue. It can reduce cost by 30%, increase revenue by over 35%, and the hiring speed and onboarding new hires is also way faster. If simply switching from analog physical signatures on paper to a digital version can have these kind of impacts, what do you think artificial intelligence can do? Because machine learning and AI will never be as bad as it is today ever again in the future. While we sleep, the machines are learning. I think it's time to start teaming up with them. Storytelling, revenue management, security, AI, facial recognition, whatever it happens to be. I want to leave you with one final story here, because I think this is largely about changing the way we've always done things around here. In 1967, the Swedish government decided we were going to shift from left lane driving to right lane driving, because that is the future of transport, ladies and gentlemen. You can see that it was every ambulance chasing lawyers Disneyland. But the Swedish government decided to come up with a great change management mantra. And they said, as you switch lanes from left lane driving to right lane driving overnight, just smile. We're all just new at this. Isn't it a wonderfully liberating change management mantra, by the way? Just smile. We're all just new at this. So imagine for a moment sending your kids, your nieces, your nephews, maybe even your elderly grandparents out across this intersection. Securely, safely, and confidently. Now, according to the World Economic Forum, over the next 10 years, we'll be able to save 1.1 million, yes, human lives courtesy of emotionally and sensorially aware vehicles. When I recently returned from my most recent overseas holiday in Liguria, Italy, unscathed, I personally welcome the day when no humans are longer behind the wheels, at least in Liguria, Italy. And when I shared this with my client in Chennai last week, they said, Anders, this is nothing new. This is what it looks like in Chennai, India, every day of the week. Plus, we have semi-autonomous cows as well. My mum always says, Anders, the digital world feels digitally dehumanized, right? But I would argue that courtesy of digital, we can all scale our empathy, our intuition, and our care for our clients. Final story. At UPS, a trucking company many of you will know about, in America, where they drive on the correct side of the road, at an event similar to this, someone said, hey, I've looked at the industry data, right? Like you get your own reports from Michaela and the rest of the team. They said 22.5% of all vehicle accidents in America happen when we turn into oncoming traffic. We sit still, we wait for that traffic to pass, we're burning fossil fuels as a result, which adds to our overheads and depletes our margins. We have lawsuits and trucks out of action. What if you just stop turning left? In America, where they drive on the correct side of the road, in Australia, no longer turning right. They're like, well, let's test this harebrained human creativity and put some GPS tags, RFID tags, and sensors onto our equipment and see whether this harebrained idea has any merit. And of course it did. Now, UPS leadership points to that one decision by a human and the later digital experimentation to see whether it had any merit, and they point to that one decision with them delivering 350,000 more parcels to happy customers every year, burning less fossil fuels, taking the equivalent of 20,000 passenger cars off the roads in terms of carbon emissions. Ladies and gentlemen, courtesy of your own intuition and your curiosity and your AI growth mindset, mixed with your human empathy, start preparing for a vastly different future, because it's where you, your kids, and your grandkids are going to spend the rest of your lives. See you in that future. Thank you.